So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience today as I had my computer trouble. I don't know what's going on, but maybe it's Mercury's retrograde or something like that with wreaking havoc with electronics. But today I'm going to talk about skills for every work environment. And one I don't have is patience. I get easily frustrated, and I think that's what happened today. So I apologize for that, but here we are. This is Dynamic Dialog. We do webinars every other week on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, which is this one is the 2nd of February. And this is a forum for sharing ideas for supply chain professionals, anything and everything, questions, resources, lessons learned. We do a short presentation, and then we make the recording available and the slides available to anyone who's interested. So let's just talk about what we all know. The work environment has changed. The pandemic reshaped a lot of things for many. A lot of workers are doing different things now. So if you look at what's the statistics are on it now that we're almost a year, which I can't believe that we're almost a year into dealing with this pandemic, workers have left high cost cities. So areas like New York and San Francisco, a lot of workers who were there don't need to be there because they can work from home or they can work remotely. So they've seen rents drop by double digits in those areas. So those are tough areas if you're a landlord. However, the surrounding areas there, the suburban areas, have the markets have shot up. I'm here in the Los Angeles area, and real estate is going through the roof here. There's very little supply and lots of demand. So especially in the suburban areas, because people want to move away from those urban cities and into cities like Denver, and I think Miami is getting a big influx of people. A couple other cities around the nation have seen a lot of people migrate to there because of a lower cost of living. Companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, they've embraced more flexible work. Facebook has even said that they anticipate about half their workers will remain working remotely for the foreseeable future. So they don't expect their employment to be back in the office in full strength, maybe ever again. A lot of companies are looking at, they're trying out, and they've envisioned these hybrid schedules where you work 2 days a week in the office and 3 days of work from home, or vice versa. Or maybe you come into the office for a few hours in the morning and then you're able to finish the day at home, or vice versa. This lets them have flexibility in hours worked and the coverage that they have from their workers, but the workers have more flexibility, and they can social distance better in the footprint that they have existing today, because they have fewer workers in the plant at any one time in the office. They Companies are finding that working remote and being able to recruit remote workers, work from home people, helps them diversify their workforce, and so they're embracing that opportunity to become more culturally, socially diverse in the workforce. We're also seeing that relocating workers that have relocated, then some of them have said they have to take pay cuts, but they found that the lower cost of living is worth it. So they may have had a reduced check, but they have lower expenses every month. And so that's a payoff, and that's a win-win. So it is a little complicated in some cases because of working in different states than you live in. So that they're working through all of that, and you're going to see some issues with that, I think, around the April 15th, and then going forward, how we work through all of that. But what the statistics are showing in one particular study that was done, they said 63% of the workers who lost their jobs to COVID have actually changed the industry they work in. So they didn't have statistics on how many have changed their job. But I know anecdotally that people I talk to say, I'm not going to do that again. I want something different. I have done this job for so many years, and now I'm looking for a different type of work, or I want to go into a different type of work, not just a different kind of industry, but a different type of work. So I think we're going to see that continue. 86% of companies say they've outsourced their warehouse and distribution to 3PLs. That's not as a result of COVID, but that was already in work before that. So now companies aren't doing that. And even though companies are fighting to recruit people, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, 56% of companies say they don't use their talent development programs and their opportunities for growth as a recruiting tool. So this could be a missed opportunity, or it could be the fact that they recognize they need to invest more in talent development. But you'll see that the skills that people have are very important. So we've had issues from the COVID. So we've seen so a lot of different workers. The things I just talked about were in general. For supply chain personnel in particular, working from home is really prevalent, and many people that I talk to have no end date. So some people say, yeah, we're on work from home until June or maybe through June or July. But other people have said they've just told us for the foreseeable future. They don't really have end dates. We are having a lot of encouraging news from the vaccines, which are available, which is great. But how that translates in the long run into coming back to work, I don't know. And companies are going to deal with the social distancing and the things. So even if you have the the vaccine, it doesn't mean that you are completely immune from the virus. You can still, what I've read says you can still get it. It's just going to be a much milder case and not nearly as severe. But then we also don't know about the rates of vaccine requirements. Some companies are stipulating that they want to mandate that you have to have a vaccine to come back to work. Other people are saying that that's not legal. So there's a lot of issues in that. Companies are looking at still putting some social distancing in the office when people are there, especially when you have visitors or people who aren't there every day. It's tough to manage people remotely when they're working from home and you can't really tell what they're doing. It's hard to measure their productivity. And as a person looking for your manager, trying to get advice, trying to get your assignments, you can do certain rote things, but to try to get help for developing skills and to know where you stand with your boss is very difficult to assess. So I think we're going to see when we get to some performance reviews and some other things that people are going to be not maybe very happy with some of that, because that connection and knowing what happens has been changed a lot. I know in the supply chain, I traveled a lot my whole career, corporate career, and very few people are traveling now to see suppliers. And conversely, suppliers aren't traveling to see their customers. So there's a lot of gap there, and that those relationships, in some cases, have suffered a little bit, and in some cases, that's giving you time to breathe. But those need to be shored up, and you need to make sure those relationships are tight. The employment market has changed. Companies are hiring people, and they are hiring more and more um, experienced and more proficient supply chain people. Now they are looking at hiring people without the mandatory relocation. It used to be that you wanted to hire somebody, you wanted them in your area. Even here in the Los Angeles area, people were reluctant to hire people that lived in a different part of town. So if you lived in North LA and you were looking for a job in Orange County, they would always ask, are you going to relocate? Sometimes companies would pay to help you relocate, help to pay, help to cover those expenses. Other times they don't, and it's all at your expense, which is a difficult thing to do. So we're seeing a lot of changes in that. I've talked to people who have gotten jobs during the pandemic. Most are interviewed solely by phone or video conference. I have one client who says she was hired about May of last year, and there are some people she still hasn't seen because all the interaction she's had with them has been by phone, not even by Zoom meetings or WebEx or anything else. So it's very an interesting dynamics. And what the pandemic has done is really highlighted skill gaps in companies where they haven't had the supply chain resources they need to tackle these challenges that have come up. Changes in lead times, changing in suppliers not going out of business or having financial problems, or any of the myriad of things we've seen over the last year. And yet, these are some of the areas where we're seeing um, some surveys. Talent development, when they did a survey and they asked who is responsible for talent development in your company or in your purview, 10% of the respondents said it was HR's responsibility to develop the talent. 24% said it relies within the supply chain function itself. and 66% said it's the joint responsibility of the individual, the manager, and HR. And really, it is a joint responsibility. It is not your manager's job to get you the skills and the growth opportunities that you need. You have a responsibility to tell your manager what your goals are, what your plans are, where you'd like to be in a year, 3 years, 5 years. And it's not necessarily just your function that has that responsibility either. It's working with HR, and it's working with the manager, and it's taking ownership of that as an individual to say, this is where I want to go. And if your company isn't able to respond to that, then it's your option to go look for another company who may be more aligned with that. And we're seeing companies say that, oh, now we have to rethink how we do that, because even though a lot of that responsibility lies with each individual, they want to have a framework to offer people as a recruiting tool and as a retention tool to have them to see that there is a growth path within their company. So the pandemic really has indicated that supply chain management, supplier management, these have emerged as really critical skill sets. It's important that you know how to do that, and it's important that your company is reaping the benefits from that and has the skilled expertise in-house to do those things. A lot of companies had a lot of things outsourced, and outsourced work that started uh, in real heavy numbers in the 90s and really was pushing in the early 2000s means you have to have more strategic concepts in your organization, which people have to understand and adhere to and help reframe all the time. And you need these supplier management tools and processes as you've outsourced everything, because now you have to manage that remotely. We've seen a lot of trends recently for companies outsourcing not only goods, but a lot more services. Almost all the companies that I've worked with and been with lately have outsourced things like their janitorial services, their security staff. A lot of them have gone as far as outsourcing their IT capabilities so that they work with other companies to do a lot of the troubleshooting with their computers. They hire other companies to tell them what types of computers are best to work to load the computers and get them ready for that. They have a small in-house staff, but a lot of their staff now to handle IT issues is contracted. Warehousing and distribution, 3PLs, 4PLs, 5PLs, that business has grown exponentially in the last 5 years, and it's going to continue to grow. And then when you had in-house services like food services, at one point in time, those people worked for the same company that you worked for. So when we went to the cafeteria, when I was first starting out working, those employees were part of the same company that I worked for. That started changing probably 20 years ago, and now it's very rare to find an in-house food service. So all of the vending machines, if there's hot food or cold food or anything like that, all of that is contracted out. If it's not contracted by the company itself, then the company makes space available for people to come in, whether it's in the form of spots for food trucks in the parking lot, or whether it's a actual patio kind of thing where people can come in and they have vendor services. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes still on what companies need, in what types of skills they need, where they need them, and what they're doing with their people in order to make their companies be as successful as possible. So I always go back to these categories of skills that I think are important. And these are um, all the research I've done looks at these in the same way. So I always start with the supply chain specific skills, including procurement skills, planning, logistics, and then everything that has to do with supply chain has to be around ethics and compliance all the way through that supply chain, from the lower tiered suppliers to the customer response, because it's very important that you comply to all the rules and regulations as you move goods around the world. You have to be cognizant of that, and you have to be ethically structured to manage that, because we're handling so much money for the companies in all of these areas. Then there's business acumen, or some general business skills that have to do with being able to calculate like return on investment, knowing what a little bit of cost accounting is about, and being able to understand the invoice process and how that gets paid, the payment terms, to be able to do some calculations on that. You need to have a little bit of insight into quality management, which can include Lean and Six Sigma, and making sure that the rejects and the scrap for your company are under control. And then you need to be able to make good decisions, and you need to be able to negotiate. Anyone in the supply chain organization is always negotiating for something, and trying to make sure that your company and your department gets the best outcome from whatever decisions are being made. You also need to have some teamwork skills or social skills. In any work environment today, almost any work environment, you need to work with a lot of other people. So you need to be part of that team. You need to be able to collaborate and negotiate, and you need to be able to exert some influence so that you can represent your function and get the best outcome for your function and your company. Diversity, inclusion, there's a lot more emphasis on this lately, and I don't think that's going to let up. I think we're going to see that for the foreseeable future until we have some settling down of these kinds of things across the globe, not just in the United States, but these things are going to be values that companies embrace and want to embrace them throughout the workforce. We're seeing a lot of social responsibility. Some ethics goes along with that, but there's also social responsibility in terms of things like sustainability, social giving back to the community, being involved with the community. There's a lot of different ways that companies display this social responsibility, and I think that's increasing, especially with the pandemic. We're seeing that companies offer their space to people to have vaccine centers. I work at a part-time at a local university. The university is closed on campus, but they have a lot of facilities, and they've made that available to the city of Los Angeles to have vaccines or to have tests done for the pandemic, for COVID. So there's a lot of things like that. You're going to see a lot of other things happening with organizations that are helping their communities that have been hit by this pandemic, because we're not through this yet. There's a lot more to come. There's a lot of strategic and big picture type thinking that people need. They need to understand risk. They need to start incorporating that risk analysis into all of their major decisions. Relationship management with your suppliers, with your stakeholders, to be understand how that works and be very strategic about managing those relationships. There's a lot of other supply chain skills that are needed. So there's further details that you can go into than the slide previously. Things like data analysis, where we need to interpret and make sense of all the data that we have available today. Professionals need to draw conclusions and be able to develop and execute strategies, take a proactive approach to work through the data that they can analyze. Inventory is a big hot button now. I'm seeing a lot of companies talking about inventory management. So being able to have that Goldilocks complex, not too much, not too little, but everything being just right. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's a very dynamic thing to do. And knowing how to do that and make those changes before things get way out of hand is very important. And companies are looking for people who know how to do that, to negotiate these longer lead times and things like that without breaking the bank and tying up all the cash that's available in inventory. Companies need flexibility. We hear a lot about this. Flexibility means you can work with a lot of different stakeholders, that you're adaptable to changes in the marketplace, and even that you can navigate the office politics successfully. So flexibility means being able to bend and adapt as the circumstances change. Employees need to have a sense of timeliness and a sense of urgency, making sure that orders get placed on time, knowing when and how much to escalate, expedite shipments, different things, to keep a smooth flow of supply running to their customers. You want to make sure that that supply that gets generated does so in a fairly consistent the fairly consistent manner, and that your customers are getting what they need. Compliance is very important. Again, it's just something that you can't take your eye off the ball on, because there's a lot of different regulations coming in all the time. They're changing. the tariffs and the duties and the taxes and the amount of hazardous material and all of those things are very, very important. More sustainability means more regulations and more um, monitoring the situation to know what's what. So you have to stay current um, and understand the laws, the regulations, all the guidelines for governance, all the policies and procedures that your company may have in place that are over and above the current laws and regulations, especially when it comes to things like protocols for COVID-19. Some companies have made mask wearing mandatory. They've put a lot more hand sanitizer dispensers in. They have social distancing um, norms that they have put in and guidelines. So they want all of their employees to follow that. Those are not laws, but those are company policies, and those need to be followed, as well as any visitors and everything else that goes with that. So all of that is changing all the time, and it's probably going to stay pretty intense for a while. You need to have some leadership skills where you have the confidence, experience, and can plan and make sure that things are under um, some kind of guidance, and that you have enough attention to detail there so that your team understands the direction and can follow you. That leadership needs to come from somewhere. And if there's not anywhere else, then someone needs to step up and be that leader, because people are looking for that. All organizations are not the same when it comes to taking risks. So, successful supply chain people know how to take appropriate risks, and they also know how to ensure escalation and communication of the risks and those associated potential impacts as appropriate. And they're proactive in trying to decrease both the potential of the risk and the impact if that risk should occur. So that takes a lot of forethought, a lot of planning, and a lot of awareness of all the risks that are possible. So once you assess the risk, you still have to make sure that you make decisions in a timely fashion. In many instances, we don't have perfect or complete information available to make a decision, but you might find that waiting for the clarity that you would like to have means you miss the opportunity altogether, or you make a poor decision. So, not to, again, back to Goldilocks, not too quickly, not too late, but just right, so that you can keep your company's progress moving and stay relevant and current with all of the situation as it changes. So if you can assess the situation, generate and evaluate options, make decisions in a timely manner, then that's the people that rise to the top in these challenging times. Communication is something all skill surveys include. Every survey that I've looked at, or every article that talks about what skills supply chain people need, communication is in there. But it's more than just being able to write a good email or a good paper or a good summary, or to create a great PowerPoint presentation. Communication is helping to build your reputation with your stakeholders, where you instill trust, you build mutual respect, you construct your own personal brand, if you will. And communication is a way to differentiate and build your own notoriety within the company in a positive way, which can lead to bigger and better career milestone achievements. Ethics, at the end of everything, supply chains personnel have to have ethic, and they're accountable for all of those things. So having those high values, morals, and adhering to company codes of conduct and policies, even when that takes longer than you think it should, avoiding the shortcuts or avoiding cutting corners. That's how you're going to get longer lengths of time for employment. You're going to have better results. And those are the skills that you need in order to be able to help ensure not anyone else is taking those shortcuts either. There's some ways to close these gaps in the workplace. Job rotations are a really good way, but only 35% in one of the surveys I looked at, only companies only use that 35% of the time. So 35% of the companies participate in job rotation programs formal, which is a real shame, because this is a great way to hone skills, to build relationships, to help new people on the job get a real sense of what the company does and who's who in the company. And it also makes you more valuable when you understand how another department works. There's a lot of low cost ways to get skills. You can read books, read articles. I always have a pile of books on my desk, and and one next to my bedside as well. Webinars, protocols. You guys are all here on a webinar today, hopefully looking for more information. There's on the job training or job shadowing, which is a great way to learn if you have good people that are strong that you can teach those skills to other people. And then you can learn through team and group projects where you pair up people or put them in smaller groups or teams in order to work on a project, maybe an improvement project. Then you can always use internal and external subject matter experts. When I worked in the corporate world, I would bring people in sometimes from other departments, like from engineering to talk about a particular technology, or from the finance accounting to talk about payment terms, somebody from quality to talk about some of the lean and Six Sigma. And it helps when they can bring in actual product that your company is working on. But you can also use external subject matter experts. I've had lawyers that are friends and colleagues of mine come in and talk to my procurement team about contracts and bring in a contract expert about something. So there's lots of ways to do that. You can lunch and learn over a webinar or a film or podcast, whatever makes sense there. You can send people to seminars and do some formal training. There's a lot of that available. You can send people to get their college degrees or certifications. There's a lot of certifications. Every organization that has supply chain in it, which is the APICS, the ISM, the CSCMP, all of those organizations do certifications. You can get a project management certification, all kinds of different things, some better than others, but look at what's applicable to what you're doing and what skill the gaps are that you're trying to fill with the certification. When it's appropriate and when it's safe, you can take tours. Touring a supplier can give you a really good sense of what's going on. You can have people that know, that do audits, point things out, talk about what they saw that was good. And it's not just a field trip where you get to go and then everybody goes home. You have to talk about what you saw, what you didn't see, what you'd like to see, ask questions. And then another way is to use university resources. If you have a project that you'd like to get some help with, there's a lot of university professors that would love to have real life projects for their students. So contact the university, get hold of a professor, or even a part of the student group and see. The universities in the California state system do a number of competitions where they have some pretty good prizes for some of these. They're sponsored by different companies in different areas. Some are marketing, some are supply chain, some are engineering, but there's all these types of things that you can encourage people to do and maybe bring that result in that, or use your real life challenge to have the students work on to be able to submit. But this is an inexpensive way to do that. It takes a little bit of time to set it up and working with the professor, and you have to make arrangements sometimes to have other people inside your factory, which is not easy to do now. But you can get some very, very good help, very enthusiastic help for free. So basically, you don't have to pay them. You just have to maybe to be involved in part of the evaluation of what went well and what didn't go so well. So you can invest in supply chain talent in a lot of ways. There's a lot of tools and technology. A manager needs to spend a little bit of time with their employees to develop them. This is something that you need to put on performance reviews, because no matter how good your employees are, no matter how skilled, I'm sure there's an area where they could improve or get a little more exposure to that. You need to make sure that you're getting funding for your team so that you do have a little bit of money. Even if you just have a few $100s, you can spring for some lunches. And nowadays you can do DoorDash kinds of things, give people a voucher for so much money for Uber Eats, and have them get lunch or a pizza or whatever, and do a webinar or a conference and podcast kind of thing. You can send them, you can buy books for the team, and each take a chapter and read that. So there's a lot of ways to do that, but you need a little bit of money, not thousands of dollars and not tens or thousands or whatever, but a little bit will go a long way. It's also important to use incentives for managers that are supporting their employees' development. And it's also important to use incentives for the employees So when they do achieve their milestones, maybe when they do get that certification, you can't necessarily promise a raise, but you can give some kind of award. If it's um, aligns with everything and it's time to give them a raise, maybe you can bump that a little bit. Maybe you can give them a bonus. Maybe you can give them gift certificates, or even just um, a couple $100 to go out and have a really nice dinner with their family. That those things go a long way, especially for people who are studying and doing things away from work that takes time away from their family too. So allowing people to do this training and development on some work time, not making that all off work time, that helps a lot too. There's a 2019 study that I saw on talent development investment. 45% of organizations said they plan to increase their budgets for talent development in 2019. 45% said they were going to maintain the level of investment that they had up to that point. And 10% said they were going to decrease the monies that they had previously spent on talent development. So it's interesting. This was a 2019 study. And of course, we all know that the pandemic hit in early 2020. So I don't have any data on what the outcome was because of that. But I know that from, again, anecdotally, several people I've talked to said they quit paying for things like membership to organizations. They cut back their training, one, because there weren't as many seminars and workshops to attend last year, and conferences were canceled or went to hybrid versions. So it was easier to do that. But, and that was, that's always an area where when costs get tight, when things get tight, you cut money there, you cut development money. But it's important that you keep some kind of program in place so that you can get those skills and abilities that you need on your team and enhance the skills of the people that you have. Online learning is a very, very powerful and very popular thing to do right now. There's a lot of things that you can take online, classes that you can take. But what I find is that the results are mixed. They don't always yield really good knowledge, and the critical and creative thinking don't always come across in some of the online, on your own kind of learning venues. So it's often better to do some kind of learning and then make sure you can reinforce that. What they show is that the most effective way to learn is learning from experience. When you actually get to do something, employ it, practice it, do it in that place of work. If you have just a learning event, a workshop, a webinar, people maybe get 10% of that out of that experience and bring that to their workplace. If you do subject matter networks, have some coaching, mentoring, it goes up to about 20%. But then that 70% is really when you get to do the thing yourself, learn how to do the problem solving, um, do that as part of the job rotation. When you really get into the thick of it, that's the best way to learn those new skills, is when you can actually do those or apply those. So in my experience, I find 4 factors that I call the 4 R's that I think are really important when you're trying to build skills, whatever you do, whether it's read an article, watch a podcast, get a book, do a project. You really need to reiterate what are the things that you are supposed to be learning out of this. What we find is that humans have to hear things about 7 times before they fully understand and process it. And remember that not all people learn the same way. So someone might go to a webinar and get a lot out of it because it's a lot of visual. Somebody else may not do that because they really need that application part of it. Somebody else may listen to something on a podcast and get most of it, of the learning out of there, because they learn by hearing more than visual or application. So not everyone learns the same way or at the same rate. So you're going to have some people catch on more quickly than others. So it's important to reinforce. Remember that your mother and your grandmother and all of those people always told you practice makes perfect. Well, the reason they keep saying that is because that's true. The more that you practice something, the better you get. So the more opportunities you have to pull those skills or those tools into the workplace, the better you're going to get with those. If you go to a negotiation class, but you don't actually conduct a negotiation or be part of one, it's not going to be very fruitful to someone. So make sure that you pull that into their actual work assignments. And remember that individual growth fuels the organizational growth. So if you get one person who's building skills, that's actually going to translate across the organization. And you'll see that other people want to learn new skills as well. Make sure that the training is relevant. Again, it's more valuable to actually do the experiential learning, but it also needs to be learning that is applicable to their job. If you have someone go learn a skill that is not going to be used in their job, it's not going to help much. You can send someone to a quality workshop, but if they're not actually working on improving the supplier's quality in the job they're in, then that's probably going to be out of their brain pretty quickly. So you might make sure it's relevant. And so if you send someone to a lean or Six Sigma workshop, make sure they come back and have places to relate that to their job, and maybe not just the suppliers processes, but internal processes. Lean is really great training for this because lean applies all over the office, and it's easy to pick out places and say, wow, this could really use some benefit from the 5S's and do some leaning out of that. Looking for waste is a good thing, more than calculating means and control limits and all of those kinds of things, and standard deviations. So make sure they can relate it back to what they do. Be responsible. Again, development is the growth. Development and growth are the responsibility of both the individual and the manager. Both people have to work together on a plan, on activities, and to support each other. When you have activity without accountability, you're wasting time and money. And that's both the company time, your time, and the company's money, and the potential money that you could be making from someone doing another activity. So it's very important to keep that in mind. What we're finding in the supply chain area is that recruiting qualified talent is challenging. That's nothing new. It's been challenging since I've been a manager, and that's more years than I want to admit. So finding that talent is challenging. If you're looking for another job or you're looking to hire people, you're going to find out that the market is really competitive, and that companies do best when they attract with packages. So that includes salary and that includes benefits. So, but there are benefits that are both monetary and non-monetary. People today are looking for more vacation or more flexible hours. So can they work from home a couple days? Can they have non-standard start and stop times? Maybe they want to come in early, or maybe they want to come in a little later and avoid some traffic and do some things. So if there's things that you can accommodate that way for benefits, that makes that package more attractive. And companies are finding that recruits are demanding development opportunities, especially in the mid-level management type area. They want to know, what is my opportunity to grow from here? What's the next position? If I come in at this position, what's the next position that I could move into? It doesn't have to be a direct, I'm going to take my boss's job, but it has to be, what opportunities are there for growth for me to improve my title, improve my salary, improve my benefits, improve my knowledge, so that if I don't stay here, I can go somewhere else. Millennials of all that we're finding are very easily lured to another job. So they don't come into jobs thinking that they're going to stay there for a long period of time. 3 to 5 years is about their outlook and their expectation. So during those 3 to 5 years, they want to be assured that they can get some skills that they can take and apply to other areas. So a survey for ease of recruitment showed that to get a specialist and analyst in, someone with some experience, but typically individual contributor, even if it's a high kind of project manager, or not a project manager, but a person who's on their way to that, they say it's about 39% easier to do that. For a project manager, entry-level manager, 20%. Director, mid-level manager, 12%, and same thing for a VP CPO, 12%, which translates to say it's more difficult to hire people at higher levels. The expectations are different. The skill sets are harder to find that actually apply to a particular company. So it's the higher you go, the harder it is to find talent that fits these. And yet we all probably know some people who are very talented and who are struggling trying to find the right job. So there's a way to match that up so that the talent and the um, opportunity meet, because once the talent is recruited, once you got them on board, then your challenge becomes to retain them, to continue to grow your staff, and to make sure that they stick around for a while. So, the good news is that the market for people with strong supply chain skills is good, and it's going to get stronger as we see the needs for goods and services continue to change from the pandemic, from the global conditions, from all of the things that we are going through. So we know that technology changes very quickly, and we know that the pandemic has exposed some risks, and there's still a lot of political challenges with like China being in Asia. There's opportunity to go to China, India. There's South America companies are going to. So there's a lot of change that we're going to still experience in the next 5 to probably 20 years. Um, so now that we're almost 12 months into this pandemic, and I know that you all turned into this webinar for a reason, because these journeys of career and personal development are important. They're important for managers as you're trying to build out your staff, but they're important for managers as an individual as well. So whether you're a manager or an individual, you always have to be looking at what is next for you. You should be working on personal goals, personal improvement opportunities, building out your personal brand, whether you're working toward that next promotion or just that another opportunity. You need to look out for your staff. You need to also look out for your manager, because your manager helps you move forward. Look out for your company, but also never forget to prioritize yourself during your career assessment and looking at all of this. I want to assure you that improvements are possible in every working environment. All of these things, whether people are in offices, working at home, online, working or not working, there are always ways to make improvements to your personal skill set. Use some of these ideas, your own experience, whatever budget you have access to. But keep in mind, we all learn different ways. We all learn at different rates, but we learn most quickly when we can apply this learning. Coaches, mentors, advisor are great people that can help. These can be formal. You don't have to pay for these. Sometimes you can pay for a coach, and that helps. I have a colleague who hired a business coach and said it's made a world of difference in her business, even though she's been in business for over 10 years right now. She's getting great value from that. Find a mentor, find someone to advise her, either within a company or without, to give you some solid advice and someone to bounce ideas off of. Apply the ideas and hold yourself and your team accountable for achieving your goals. And when you do, don't forget to be celebratory and do all of that. So keep in mind those 4 R's: reiterate, reinforce, make things relevant, and take responsibility. So that's our dynamic dialogue today. Next time, in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about business continuity in terms of suppliers. We're going to look at organizational maturity of supply chains. And even though you might have a very small staff and a not very sophisticated system of planning, you can look at where you can go from there and how you can still improve, even if you're not very far along on that maturity curve. And then the end of March, we're going to talk about supplier diversity and why that can make your company more competitive with their customers, with their recruits, possible with the people they're hiring, and with their suppliers. You can always check out our events at purple-link.net at events. If you want further discussion, set up a call with Jane. Just hit the call with Jane. Sometimes it helps to put the HTTP in front. And you can talk to me about how Purple Link can help your business, because there is a better way to reduce cost and risk. We are starting a workshop in about a little over a month for the CPSM exam tune, and I'm putting together another workshop for, I think, starting in the April timeframe. So I'm going to leave you with this, because our topic today was skills and improvement. Unless you try to do something beyond what you have already mastered, you will never grow. So we all know that a lot of the growth comes from the challenges and that irritation. If you think about the pearl, and that beautiful pearl comes because there's irritation within that oyster. So try to do something beyond what you've already mastered this year. And I wish you all luck. So now I'll take questions, comments.